So first out of the gate, we have the Reverend Deacon Jonathan Stewart, who's going to be talking about Saint Expedite. It's entitled Saint Expedite, Magic, History, and Devotion. So Jonathan is a Montreal-based writer and editor, originally from Canada's East Coast. He grew up on Prince Edward Island, was secretly born in Alberta, and attended university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and moved to the LaBelle province in 2006. After 4 years of writing 9 to 5 in a corporate environment, he's now working in the terrifying land of freelancing. He's long had a passion for all things Gnostic, esoteric, and mystical, and podcasting. And some of this started with him reading Philip K. Dick when he was 12 and moving straight into the Nag Hammadi intravenously when he was way too young to understand any of it. He came across the AJC in 2011 and has been in love with the welcoming and supportive Johannite community ever since. He joined the church in 2013, was admitted to the minor orders in 2014, the subdiaconate in 2018, and the diaconate in 2019. And there's a big question mark next to the little priesthood box that should be there. Who knows? Who knows? It's a mystery. You're going to have to keep tuning in every year to find out exactly when Jonathan will be a priest, but we hope it'll be soon. So with that, I'm going to switch the focus over to you. And I welcome you to dive right in to the voodoo.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. I think this is going to be a really great show. Really been Hey folks, it's really great to be here with you all, and of course people will be watching and listening to this later. The bio is more or less still up to date. I need to make it shorter, even though I am in love with myself, such as the life of an egoist. But we're not here to talk about me, which is why I'm going to start this this discussion. It's not a talk or a lecture, a discussion, talking about my favorite topic, me. It's kind of ironic. With the actual topic being Saint Expedite, and you're going to be watching and listening to this, wondering when is he going to get to Saint Expedite. But I wanted to talk about some of my own history with saints, because I wanted to talk about some of my own relationship with this very interesting figure of Expedite. And I think those that know me, I grew up a liberal Protestant, and my dear grandfather, who right now is rolling in the grave, was even though he had a strong interest actually in the occult and in Freemasonry, was a devoted Presbyterian who thought that an elaborate stained glass window in a church meant that the Pope was going to bust in any moment, right, and forcibly baptize you so that he could control the world. And I think even though my mother's side is Catholic, because I grew up in the liberal United Church, and I mostly went to any other churches with my grandparents, that the saints were very strange for me. And there's sort of kind of two contrasting streams there, which is, one, you do have this kind of more conservative Presbyterian idea that this is pagan, that this is wrong, that this is bad, or if it's not all that, it's foolishness, right? It's popish foolishness. It's getting in the way between you and your direct relationship with Jesus and God. And with the more liberal upbringing, where you're not getting any negative messages like that, there's still sort of an undercurrent of this is unsophisticated, it's kind of weird, it's superstitious, it's not something that we do, it's not we're going to talk about social justice, we're not going to talk about these old myths and legends. And again, I really loved the church I grew up in, but I remember, and perhaps this is one of the breadcrumbs that led me to the Apostolic Johannite Church, is in the United Church that I grew up in, I was fascinated by this strange stained glass window of some saint. They didn't have a name, which was funny, holding a chalice, a goblet, a cup with a winged dragon or snake coiling out of it, right? And I would stare at that and just be like, what's going on here? And I remember asking, I believe both the minister and a deacon, and other leaders, like, who is that? And somebody's like, I think it's St. Paul. And of course, this was St. John. So sometimes I look back and I feel an almost anger or loss that the saints weren't part of the first part of my religious upbringing, because they're both radically human and both radically mythical at the same time. They're presented as human beings. They're presented as people who go through things that we can understand, things that anybody encounters. But at the same time, particularly when you look at like medieval legends, when you look at some of the stuff that people think is unsophisticated, it's pure mythology. They're fighting dragons, they're flying through the sky, they're healing people. And there's a richness there of this combination of the radically human and the radically mythical that really speaks to my soul. And I think sometimes too, I'm quite fond of that Jesus guy. He's number one with me. Really, really, really love that guy. But the fact that there's all these other conduits to God, people who are on my side and are cheering for me and want to get me there, closer to the divine mysteries. People that I can talk to, connect to in meditation, prayer, and through my imagination. Okay, the next part of my rant is imagination. I think, moving away from my biography, why the saints are so important for right here, right now, in this demented and sick society that we live in. I was joking in the comments there. My fave superhero is with us, which is the Cupperman, right up there with the Superman and the Batman, because we have Dr. Cupperman joining us. I've always been, and people are going to be surprised by this, because I know you look at me and think, okay, here's an alpha Chad, but I've always been a bit of a nerd, bit of a geek. And growing up, really liked comic books, really liked Star Wars and stuff like that. Still really like all that stuff. Now, being a geek, being a nerd, being whatever you want to call it, has become incredibly mainstream. That's not why I'm about to criticize it, even though that is, what hipsters do when stuff that they love goes mainstream. But I found that the sort of unhealthy obsession with some of these material and the characters that are in it has broken into our society in an incredibly unhealthy way. I work online. I spend too much time trapped in the computer. And you don't really need to be online. You just need to be interacting with anybody who's youngish to discover that people are incredibly obsessed with celebrities and fictional characters, where it becomes their central obsession, their central locus of community, and one of the most important things to them. And this is fictional characters like, Marvel superheroes. It's celebrities, which in a way are fictional characters, because we don't actually know the celebrity. We just know the image that is packaged and sold to us. And if you're not familiar with so-called fandoms, the people spend all their time thinking about these people and these characters, obsessing about them, writing stories about them, arguing about them, viewing the world through them. I was right before this call, when I was pretending to work. Instead, I was on social media, kind of having a chuckle with a friend, because there's a controversy right now with St. Taylor Swift, and people were really seeing politics and the world through Taylor Swift. And whether you like or don't like this particular pop star, I don't think that that's political, and I don't think what she does is political, and I don't think that that's politics. And there's literally millions of people. This is not a niche geek nerd fan thing anymore, even though they're sometimes referred to as fandoms. This is millions and millions and millions of people. It's become a huge part of our society. I'm going somewhere with all this. So it seems to me that we have, and I don't want to be making too many statements about what it means to be human, but something calls out deep within us to connect to archetypical figures, to connect to heroes, villains, mighty people who do mighty things. And this seems to, at least to me, some of it is culture and implanted in us culturally, but because as early as we have records, we have human beings writing about such figures, obsessing about such figures, arguing about such figures, viewing the world through such figures, that it seems to be a central part of the human condition. So I think that a world that perhaps is orientated towards saints or other figures like saints, if you're not working in a Christian mythology, is a lot healthier, feeds the imagination, feeds the need for something bigger, feeds the need to connect more than a Batman or a Taylor Swift. So this brings me all to Saint Expedite. Something else to talk about myself, but before we get into the dear saint, is that's right. What are we at? Okay, we're already at 15 minutes. I'm not expediting this. I'm sort of an obsessive. I'm a Libra, so I always go back and forth, both when I'm speaking, which I think makes me sound wishy-washy, or I'm trying to hide something, but it's really not that. I go back and forth all the time when I talk about religion. Is it completely psychological? Is it completely mythical? Is it completely in one's head? And all that is, in my opinion, good. Or is it something that's exterior and supernatural? Or is it a mix of column A and B? So unfortunately, I always have to do that because I do it within my head. So I have no idea if there is an entity called Saint Expedite out there that is helping me, that is assisting me, that answers my prayers, that wants to have a relationship with me. But I act like he does, and I act like that's real, and that seems to do something for me at least. And I think if someone is going to adopt that view, that at the end of the day, this is still psychologically healthy as long as you don't go, too nuts with it. Same thing if you believe in a complete supernaturalist, right? I don't think it's necessarily healthy to be like, well, I can quit my job because this saint is going to take care of me. So as always, the middle path, a little bit of column A and B. But there is something, again, I think deeply within all humans that calls out for a relationship to the sacred, even if that sacred is completely material, is based on the mythological, psychological structure of humanity. I often think about nature spirits. They may not literally be real, but the good that it does us to have a reverence for nature, the good that it does us to have a reverence for trees, for the lakes, for the rivers, and to express that by leaving an offering or lighting a candle, at a sacred grotto, I think is deeply nourishing. So I think worshiping, being with, honoring the things that Saint Expedite represents is incredibly good, at least for me. And there is evidence that rituals are good for humans, even if you're an atheist. There was a study that came out a few years ago that I read about in Psychology Today, that having rituals, doing something ritualistically, even if it's drinking your coffee in the morning, seems to create a healthy structure for people. Okay, let's actually get into Saint Expedite. I think sometimes some people will be like, what would this particular saint have to do with Gnosticism? And the AJC is not just a Gnostic church, right? It's an esoteric and a mystical church. It has the entire heritage of Christianity that it embraces, that it has lineages from. But at the same time, a lot of us come to the AJC because of this wacky ancient heresy known as Gnosticism. And Gnosticism, for me, it's very hard to define what Gnosticism is, even with scholars, even with practitioners, even with clergy. It is something that embraces and works with some of the repressed and pushed down aspects of Christianity and religion. And Saint Expedite is a saint that is pushed down and repressed, that is often embraced by people who are pushed down and oppressed. So I see him as representing the inbreaking of a force that wants to be known, that recognizes, that wants to help. And if you Google his name online, and perhaps this is a countervailing to the fandoms and other things let's talk about our society, you'll see that he's actually become more popular over the last, decade or so. You can find quite a bit about him online. You can find quite a lot of people talking about him online. If you've heard of him before, you probably know three things. One, that he's the saint for getting things done fast for emergencies. You can probably guess that from his name. Two, that he's a folk saint. He's not an official saint, and we'll use the Catholic Church for an example. In fact, he used to be a saint, but the Catholic Church de-sainted him. You might have heard that. And then third, you've probably heard some variation on the following story. There's a medieval convent of French nuns, and they have no patron saint. So they request that the bishop designate them a saint and send a statue also. The bishop complies, and not wanting the good women to wait, he has the statue placed in a large crate marked in big letters, Expedite. And the untutored, ignorant nuns, upon seeing the huge crate, thought that it contained the statue of a saint who was named Saint Expedite. And that is the origins of this figure. Because unlike some of the better known saints, we don't actually know that much about them. We don't have elaborate biographies, elaborate works, variations on those works, like that we have even with some beloved similar folk saints. So those two things, the desainted talk. Well, he hasn't been desainted. Good news. The process of making a saint in the Catholic Church has gone through a lot of changes over the last 2,000 years. But to make a short story long, it started off that each bishop could make a saint, and people often thought that anybody who was martyred should be a saint. About 1,000 years ago, the process starts getting a little bit more official, and then about the 15th century, 16th century, even more official. The Pope and the circle around him takes that upon himself as the one who can make saints, and eventually we have a formal process of canonization, which I'm sure many people watching, listening, and are here live have heard about this, right? The saint has to have X amount of miracles. There's a trial of a devil's advocate. It's a very regimented process. But the saints that were sainted before this process are still considered saints. There are official churches named after Saint Expedite in the Catholic and other traditions all around the world. There's statues of Saint Expedite found within large Catholic churches and other churches all around the world. Now, what did happen is the Catholic Church did go through some reforms where they looked at their liturgical calendar, which had a lot of saints' days. And for some of the saints that didn't have very good historical grounding, who did seem to be more legendary, who seemed to be quote-unquote more folk saints, ones that, and perhaps we'll get into the love of the people and the dangers of a folk saint to institutions at some point in this talk. They decided to take off the official celebration, the required celebration of these saints on their days. And Saint Expedite was one of these saints. Famously, if you've heard about this before, it's Saint Christopher. You'll often hear people will tell you, as I said, my mom was raised Catholic. She's told me, I heard that Saint Christopher's not a saint anymore because even now he's still a beloved saint. But that's what happened to him. Not desainted, just had his day removed. Okay, so the story with the box with Expedite written on it. You'll find all sorts of variations on that story. You find it happening all around the world, which I think is funny. You find it happening in all sorts of different aeons, times, and decades, but it's definitely not true. We know this because what we do know about Saint Expedite, and the fact that perhaps there's something historical there, is that he is on a list of early martyrs, a list that goes back to at least the 4th century. And we have records of him sort of popping up much later than that, but starting to become popular, strangely, in Germany in like the 16th century. The other thing, too, is that because we find this story all around the world, that also tells us it's not true, unless there's a mysterious cult of Saint Expedite, just like sending out these statues to random churches and random nuns. I want to tell two other variations on that. So Saint Expedite's life is a mystery. Very little has been documented apart his martyrdom and stories surrounding the discovery of a statue. One version of the story of how Saint Expedite came to be in New Orleans is recounted by Father Dan Cambria of the Divine Mercy Chapel in New Orleans. He states it was the Ursuline nuns who received an unidentified statue just prior to the French Revolution. All over the exterior of the crate in which the statue was housed were the words Expedite. The nuns proceeded to open up the box, and when they saw the statue, none of them recognized the identity of the saint. They asked the bishop to send more information. They wrote to him, but unfortunately the French Revolution had already begun and they never received a reply. So they placed the statue of the unidentified saint, whom they now called Saint Expedite, in the corridor of their school, where he remained for several decades. The students at the convent eventually developed what they referred to as a 9-hour novena. Traditionally, it's a 9-day novena to Saint Expedite. Saint Expedite's novena for 9 hours was incredibly officious. So the students achieved positive results when praying this, and his devotion continued to grow among the student body, and he gained a reputation for bringing fast results to prayers. There's also another variation I like on this is Reunion Island. I know I'm not saying that all fancy and French but it is, we'll come back to Reunion. It is an island that is off the coast of close to Madagascar, and it's a French protectorate. Is a former colony. A French department is what they're called. So it's technically part of France, and we find that story as well with Reunion Island. But we're going to come back to Reunion. And Will Linden gave me by the way, I forgot to talk about comments and questions. Thanks so much, Will. A lot of them were local figures of Latium, now subsumed in the feast of the first martyrs of the Church of Rome. So that was a comment for people who are listening and watching later about a lot of these saints who lost their own day. So thanks so much, Will. By the way, we don't have to wait for questions and comments to the end. You can interrupt at any time, particularly when I get something wrong. So you feel free to pound that question button. Okay, so he's give me one sec here. Okay, so the actual story that is behind Saint Expedite, the legend of who he is and where he came from. So during the Diocletian persecution in the year 303. That's the Emperor Diocletian. He's cracking down on the Christians. He's throwing them to lions. He's grinding them up. Expeditius was a Roman centurion in Armenia who became a Christian. The day that he decided to become a Christian, the devil took the form of a crow and told him to defer his conversion until the next day. Expedite stamped on the bird, killed it, declaring, "No, I'm not going to wait until tomorrow. I will be a Christian today." Something that's really funny about that is in Latin, and I'm going to pronunciate this very badly. Tomorrow is something like cross, so it does sound like the crawing of a crow, because it in the legend, the crow is saying it over and over again: tomorrow, 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 craw, craw, craw. But Saint Expedite says "odie," which means today, stamps on the crow. Give me a sec for my voluminous notes. I just want to give up everything that he is the saint for. I think people are starting to catch on that he is a saint that is associated with ending procrastination, a saint of getting things done right away, a saint of answering prayers right away, a saint of having things happen in an efficient manner, a focus on right here and right now. So this is how I came to start thinking about Saint Expedite, to get my statue of Saint Expedite, to start lighting candles and leaving offerings for Saint Expedite, because for my whole life I've had problems with procrastination that continue and sometimes ruin my life. Hopefully Expedite's helping a little bit. Also for my whole life, I'm let's not say how old I am, but I'm what they now call an elder millennial, or also a zennial, meaning I'm between Generation X and the millennial millennial generation. If I'd been just a couple years older, I would have been pumped to the gills with Adderall or a similar drug when I was a child, because for my whole life, people have told me I have ADHD. And even then, I was told that then it was ADD. It's become very trendy to diagnose oneself with ADHD, but I have gone ahead and done that. But I know from a whole bunch of different experiences that constitutionally I'm unable to take the class of drugs that is prescribed for ADHD. So I'm currently looking for other ways to work with this particular setting that's in my brain. Hopefully, as is evidence said at the beginning, I am presently a freelancer, hoping to get some great insurance from my partner and maybe start working with an ADHD coach. So he is the saint of getting stuff done, of avoiding procrastination. And for me to even mythically to light a candle and make sure that I don't put that off till tomorrow, to make sure that I have a regular devotion to this figure, that I'm doing some sort of pattern and habit, that for me does something. I mentioned him being popular. He's actually incredibly popular, because he is a saint that is on the side of the little guy, and he has that reputation. So, and I think too, that's why he's sometimes looked down upon. Sorry, I'm bouncing around all over the place, but it is that ADHD thing I just mentioned. Going back to the story of the nuns, right? I didn't, I copied and pasted that from somewhere. I can't remember where, but it says at some place the untutored nuns, the ignorant nuns, right? Silly women. There's this sexism and this racism that lurks around the devotion to Saint Expedite, because it is a lot of racialized people that are particularly devoted to him, and it is a lot of women. And I think this story of Expedite on the crate is sort of backonymed back up into that. First comes the sexism and the racism, then comes the story about goofy, not very smart people making up a saint because they read the words Expedite on a box. And because of his association with racialized, oppressed people, he actually is also a saint of revolution, which I think is very interesting. And I think that does, it's something that I think all of us, no matter, I'm not getting into politics here, you can want a revolution no matter where you are in the political spectrum, right? It's something that everybody wants today, but I don't think that's why he became a revolutionary saint. But one of the reasons that he's associated with some of the oppressed people is because he is a saint of getting material stuff done. So he is the saint of, I'm having problems with my landlord and I need that fixed right now. I need $200 to buy groceries and I need that right now. These are the things that people often go to Saint Expedite for, and what he's known for is for this direct help. Now, again, I don't know if he can actually do that. But it doesn't hurt, right? Like, it hurts if you quit your job, or it hurts if you're not doing anything else to get that $200. But for the love of Mike, if you spend 20 minutes lighting a candle to a statue of Saint Expedite because you need help paying rent, it's not going to hurt anything, right? And it might actually help, because again, I go back and forth. There might be a supernatural power out there. I will tell you this. I will make a definite statement of belief for a change, which is, I do believe that Expedite represents a force that wants to be known, that is inbreaking to our world, to humans. Again, maybe that is a mythic psychological force. Maybe it's a supernatural force. Folks, it's probably a combination of the both. Incredibly popular saint. One of the ways that he is incredibly popular is that he is adopted by hoodoo workers. Hoodoo is known by many names, most popularly as conjure or root working. It's considered a folk magical tradition that weaves together European, Native American, and West African elements together. Hoodoo is believed to have originated in Mississippi, formulated by slaves working on plantations at the time. It spread throughout the region, now the entire world. It's particularly associated with New Orleans. As I mentioned, sometimes I mentioned the story of Saint Expedite maybe even starting in New Orleans. He's sometimes considered a patron saint of New Orleans. The beauty of hoodoo is that it's syncretic. It evolves and incorporates many different spiritual traditions together. But there's a clear presence of Christian saints in its spiritual practice. At first, the Africans who were harshly brought here as slaves, they still believed in traditional West African spirituality that was mostly nature-based, but also had a concept of a supreme creator with a pantheon of lesser-known but highly venerated deities. So these deities, this association with deities, this remembrance of deities underneath this supreme creator, these become saints. Sometimes synchronized as saints, sometimes just making us a template. They also had a heavy reliance on charms and spells. So at the time, in time, Christianity seeped into the overall population. The old beliefs were replaced, and what was not replaced was incorporated with new Christian beliefs. What's different from hoodoo, has many similarities, is Haitian voodoo. We don't really have time to get into. I have a deep interest in Haitian voodoo, but I'm not an expert. So again, people can correct me in any of the if you are an expert and you're here live in this talk. But there's a lot of misconceptions about voodoo. In many ways, it is now recognized as a separate religion. I believe something like 2% of Haiti consider that their religion to be voodoo, and it's probably more than that because of it can still be looked down upon in some communities. But for the vast majority of the history of voodoo, it was practiced by Christians who thought that they were doing a kind of Christianity. It wasn't seen as completely separate. Again, just like what I read about hoodoo, it is this combination of all sorts of syncretic traditions and beliefs. The majority and most important of them coming from Africa and being enacted by enslaved people. When you read about voodoo, you'll often hear something like they continued their traditional veneration of their deities because they didn't want to convert to Catholicism, so they just used the saints as a placeholder. They stuck them in there, and they're like tricking the slave masters. And maybe that's true, and maybe that isn't. But when you actually talk to some voodooists, when you actually read some interviews with voodooists, when you read some of the material, it's actually more sophisticated than that. Where again, the beliefs are meshed together. Voodoo can vary quite a bit because there's no central authority. It was mostly an oral tradition. So, village to village, teacher to teacher, community to community. But one of the mythologies actually is that the saints and the apostles were created by God as the African deities. And then they become incarnated into the bodies of these mighty heroes, of these apostles. So it's not that statue of the saint was a hidden face of this god they wanted to worship. It's both at the same time. Saint Expedite is popular in forms of voodoo, and he's synchronized with voodoo Loa, a spirit named Baron Samedi, who is the ruler of death, who is the ruler of the graveyard, who is associated with the famous zombie, but is also associated with embracing life, paradoxically, right? Thinking about death makes us appreciate life, so I shouldn't say paradoxically, is associated with spirituality and magic, is associated with getting stuff done in this life because time is short. Baron Samedi is an incredibly important figure in Haitian voodoo. Therefore, Expedite can be an incredibly important figure in voodoo. I really like synchronized figures because Gnosticism itself is a syncretic religion where you have all sorts of things pouring into it historically thousands of years ago, and you have all sorts of things pouring into it now. Oh, something that's fun. I just saw it in my notes. I'm sorry. I'm jumping around a little bit. We're going to come back to dying, everybody. He's recently become the patron saint of nerds because of hacking and computers. because those are things that people have. The hackers, computer programmers are often on very tight deadlines, things that need to be done now. Also, of money, emergencies, lawsuits, landlords. That's also usually poor landlords, but also people who are having difficulties with landlords. Students, we heard that student story, but also, who needs help right away, who's procrastinating? Students. Curse breaking, because he does things quickly. He's become associated with magic and black magic, because if you believe that you're under a curse, you don't want that to continue. So Expedite becomes quite associated with getting rid of curses. Okay, death. So why death? Hodie today. People here are probably familiar with a memento mori, which is, you think about death. Often with a memento mori, you think about right here and right now. You seize the day, carpe diem, because you could die at any moment. Thinking about death gives us a greater appreciation of life. Thinking about death makes right here, right now richer, because any of us at any second may not have a tomorrow. There may not be a cross for us, a croc. There may not even be 5 minutes from now, for all we know. A meteorite might hit the Earth. So because of this immediacy with the memento mori, because of this focus on the here and now, which leads to a thinking about death, and thinking about death makes us thinking about here and now, Saint Expedite becomes associated with death. Also, the crow. He's stomping on the crow in his iconography. For those who are watching the video or watching it live, you can see my statue. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Expedite, I didn't pay the most money in the world for this statue, and the crow is mispainted as green. But again, when you have people who are not necessarily literate experts in symbology, don't have their degree in symbology, they see the crow and they see the man stomping on the crow, right? And the crow is, in many cultures, a symbol of death. So just looking at the statue, okay, this has something to do with dying. The other way, too, that he becomes associated with death is that he quickly moves between the worlds, right? Because the idea is that he's almost a bridge to the world of magic, of the divine, of gods, of God, right? If you need a miracle to happen, he has to have a foot in each world, right? He has to be here. You want something material, but he also has to be there. Or he has to go over to that other side and do something for you, for a miracle to come here. And what's over there? What's that other side? That's the world of death in many folk beliefs, and actually in many religions, and in many sophisticated religions. So he becomes sort of a psychopomp, a Hermes-style figure, because sometimes we forget that Hermes is associated with death because of the same reason, right? Hermes goes between Mount Olympus, he goes between the earth, he goes between Hades, right? He's the one who moves quickly. He's got wings on his feet. He's moving between these worlds. And by the way, possibly there might even be an ancient syncretic relationship with Hermes because of him being a Roman soldier associated with Rome. His day is Wednesday, which was Hermes' day, or Mercury's day, whatever you want to call him. So because he quickly moves between these worlds, he becomes associated with death. And that's also why he becomes synchronized with Baron Samedi, who is this figure of death. For those who know Baron Samedi at all, he's often represented as a skeleton. He has a skeleton in a top hat. So very, very obviously a death figure, besides the graveyards and everything else. The other things I like about Saint Expedite. So working with Saint Expedite, you offer him candles, you offer him specific prayers, you do a novena that is 9 days or 9 hours. He's said to really like Sara Lee pound cake, red flowers. He's sometimes called the Minute Saint. I think you all know by now why. He's also been referred to as a saint of many colors, which I like, because in his iconography, it's simply because there's a lot of colors. So he holds the martyr's green laurel. He has a red cloak. He's stomping on sometimes a green crow. He has a silver breastplate. He has a brown cross. So there can be a lot of things that you can present to him that are those colors. You can light candles that are those colors. Sometimes doing a novena, it's a different a different colored candle every day. It's said that he likes green things, and that's also his association with money and the martyr's laurel that he holds. Something that I do really like about him that I think gets past my liberal Protestant programming is the kind of crassness of Saint Expedite, because I always want to be this really sophisticated, religious scholar who talks about, long dead Greek guys who thought of a bunch of really sophisticated things that has a bunch of complicated names and slotted into some sort of diagram where there's different levels and things. So I think Expedite helps me break through that programming, because there is an unsophisticated crassness to I want a miracle. I want this dead guy to get me $200 so I can pay my phone bill, and in return I'm going to give him a piece of cake. This is all leading up to something else that I like about him is he's renowned for punishing you if you don't follow through, and if you don't follow through quickly. So if you don't give him that piece of cake, if you don't give him red flowers, which is something else he said to like, then he's going to like kick your ass, and quickly, because he's the saint of getting things done. Again, I don't know if any of this is literally true, but it speaks to my imagination. It feeds my imagination. I act like it's true. And it helps me, again, with some of my procrastination problems, and I think it helps me with some of my spiritual pretentiousness. Something else that I really like is often you will make this request, you'll do this working, you can look it up online. Sometimes it can be very simple. I've heard of people snapping their fingers and praying to Saint Expedite, or it can be as simple as that, or elaborate rituals where, midnight on Wednesday and you're starting a 9-day novena and what have you. But once you start it, whatever it is you're doing with him, you turn him upside down, and then you put him right side up when he comes through for you. The people probably know of the folk Catholic traditions, and working with saints, I've heard something similar. You punish the saint statue until he does what you've asked him to do, or until he's or if he doesn't do what you ask him for. But there's something I like about that, of turning the statue upside down. Again, there's a kind of a delightful direct relationship, which is, again, kind of crass, but kind of fun. And I have heard sophisticated takes on this turning the statue upside down, which is you're inverting the order of the world, because any miracle, no matter how small, is big. Right? Like winning $1 million and getting $200 is both equally a miracle. If it comes out of nowheres, you're still breaking the laws of physics as we know it. So you're inverting the natural order. Therefore, you invert the statue of the saint. So that's a very sophisticated take on it, folks. That's probably overthinking it. You're putting him upside down because he wants to be right side up again. You're kind of freshening him until he comes through for you. So Father Giulio says, you often see thank you messages to Saint Expedite in the newspapers. Many believe you have to thank him publicly. Thank you, Father. Don't worry, I was getting to that. Something else that I like about him is I like it when people compliment me. I like it when people tell other people that I'm cool. This never happened. I should be saying I hypothetically like this. Saint Expedite is renowned for this as well. If he comes through for you, you are supposed to publicly thank him and tell people to work with him as well. Tell people to pray for him. Tell the world. So as Father John was saying, in New Orleans, you open up the newspaper, you'll see small ads, right? Just saying, thank you, Saint Expedite, and sometimes what he's come through for. Lately, it's become common on the internet. There's websites that are just message boards for thanking Saint Expedite. I actually seen it here in the newspaper in Montreal. People have bought ads thanking Saint Expedite because, again, he is a worldwide popular saint, but he is particularly popular in France and communities that have connections to France, like Haiti and New Orleans. He was and is popular in Italy. I think he has gone down a little bit in Italy, but he was very popular in Naples. He's very popular with the New Orleans Italian community, where they have traditions with him that I really like, where instead of giving him offerings, they feast with him. So you put him at the table on Saint Expedite's day, and the whole community has sort of a rowdy dinner with Saint Expedite. There's something about that I really like. And the Father Giulio saying pound cake. He is particularly renowned for liking pound cake, and specifically Sara Lee pound cake, which you can buy most places frozen. So if you're interested in working with Saint Expedite, get yourself some frozen pound cake. Okay, folks. Wow, I almost did the whole hour, and I still have more to talk about. So you're all very lucky that there is a time limit on this. Do we have any questions, comments, contributions? Again, it doesn't have to be a question. You can just jam about anything I've said or about what you know about Saint Expedite. So do we have anything at all for these last 10 minutes here?
I do have a comment and a question. Yep. The comment I was gonna mention, you were talking about whether or not praying to the saint or making an offering or saying a prayer in front of a statue, whether or not it has effect. And this was something actually that I think we were discussing not too long ago in the parish, that I think they have, of course, done studies about the effects of prayer or whatever. And I don't know that any of those have been conclusive. I'm not sure if any of them can be conclusive, but I do think it's pretty conclusive that prayer has an effect on the one who makes it. Right. Not only from, kind of regular kind of physiological or psychological stuff, but just in terms of, making an offering or a prayer to a saint, in some ways you can put it hand in hand with the use of the tarot. It forces you to organize your thoughts. It forces you to understand what is actually important in the moment by breaking it down into a sentence or a phrase or a particular idea, right? It helps you separate out, it's kind of like the old talk about the elevator speech. If you only have 30 seconds, what's the most important thing to say? And I find that working with saints, allows me to do that. Now, one thing, because there was some chatter as we were planning conclave, because I know there are lots of Johannites who are big fans of Saint Expedite, and I noted actually to jog my memory that I actually have a Saint Expedite kit downstairs that I got from Father John, I think years ago when we met up for the first time in Rock Island, which must have been 11, 12, 13 years ago now. I'm just going to throw this out there because we've got all sorts of saints on our calendar, but Saint Expedite isn't officially on the list. So I guess if I were to ask a question, in your opinion as a practitioner, what would make Saint Expedite a AJC or Johannite saint?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one is, I have to agitate for him because I need bill money, right? Because the more he's recognized, the more he'll help me. So there's one. But outside of that,
all Johannites are stone poor. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one. But I think too, there's two things there, which is we do have a heritage from Haiti, right, through our lineages, and I think without doing any cultural appropriation, that is one way of recognizing that heritage of that lineage, and I think as well, if I was going to argue for Expedite as a saint, his cult is as a Johannite saint. His cult is ancient. There's both sort of high and low ways of working with him. Because I think sometimes we've been accused of either being anti-intellectual or too intellectual, right? Oh, those guys are always just rambling about these old texts, right? And then, people who are more scholarly will sometimes say there never was such a thing as ancient Gnosticism. They're just talking out of their butts. But that reputation, I think, of that I'm just speaking about myself here. The reputation that I have probably cast upon the church is a nerdy guy with glasses who rambles too much, right, about stuff. And I'm rambling right now for your very simple question.
I was going to say, it doesn't really narrow it down. The only thing you could have stood to throw in there is perhaps bald, but you've got hair, so
It's on its way out, eminence. That's when I'll join the priesthood. So I think there's something about embracing a folk saint, embracing a saint that is sometimes viewed as unsophisticated, that helps us with that reputation. So I think those would be my two arguments, right? A recognition of some of our voodoo and hoodoo heritage as well. I don't really know if we have a hoodoo heritage, but we have hoodoo practitioners who are also Johannites. We have this Haitian tradition, and sometimes I put on smarty pants too much. But of course, as I said, he does have this higher aspect. Eminence, when you're talking about the psychological proof of working with saints, well, they have done studies like memento mori, thinking about death, is psychologically healthy for you, right? Expedite as a ponderer of death, working with Expedite to make you think about the here and the now, Expedite to think about what's going to happen to you when you die. That's very sophisticated, very very advanced and good for us all. So I think those are some of my arguments. Yeah.
One thing I was going to add, simply because you've got the blur on, so we didn't get a clear thing. If you could put Saint Expedite in front of you with your hand behind you, that way we can see it.
Oh yeah. So
maybe put your hand behind or something. There we go. So we can get a clear. There we go.
Yeah. So sorry about this. Yeah, I had my notes up instead of looking at my enormous head on the screen, so we can see him there. You can see he's saint of many colors. Usually the gold cross that he holds says Odie. You can see that he has the martyr's laurel. You can see that he's stepping on. Oh wait, can you see that he's stepping on a? It's all right if you see it as a green smudge. We've got a green crow there. So yeah, there he is.
Father John's got one as well, though it's a lot cuter. I'm just going to throw that up here quickly.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
That is pretty adorable.
Oh, there's one thing I forgot. I see that Harvey has a question. Sorry, Harvey. For its possible origins, and probably something that is more true than the Expedite box story, is Expeditus was a kind of Roman legionnaire, one that moved quickly because he had a light pack, and I think they would send him to the front. So in this ancient list of martyrs, it could have been Expeditus. That might have been the martyr's job, not his name, or it could have been a nickname he was given because he was an Expeditus. So that could be the origins of his name. So sorry that I forgot that earlier. But Harvey, please.
Just a little contribution, and by way of one of the not very stellar piece of evidence in favor of synchronicity, but I do recall that more than half a century ago, one of the high schools I attended in Ontario, I think it was Niagara Falls Collegiate Vocational Institute in Ontario, or possibly Burlington High School again in Ontario, but the motto of the school, I think, in Niagara Falls, was "Hodie non cras," and I never I don't know that you were told that said today, not tomorrow, and I don't know how it got there, and I've never recall it having a big influence on the culture of whatever school it was, and it certainly did not, in my subsequent life, turn me into a paragon of punctuality. But anyway, I throw that in for what it's worth.
Thank you so much.
I think we know how they got funding for the school.
Yes. Yeah. That's there could be an origin story there. So, and of course, Harvey, we originally met for the Jung Society. I got through the whole lecture without invoking the dear doctor, but I think you could probably tell near the beginning when I was talking about the psychological preset. I really do kind of see Expedite as an archetypical figure in the Jungian sense, right? This Jungian archetype that is a story that lives in all of us, that wants to be expressed right here, right now, not tomorrow. Father John, please.
Sure. I was just going to add a couple of funny anecdotes. First of all, when you mentioned about the Italian community, I would love to know the history of this as well. Being a member of the Sons and Daughters of Italy, our largest, most active chapter in the United States is in Louisiana, and it's the Saint Expedite chapter, or the Saint Expedite Lodge of the ISDA. So that's the group when you're talking about they have the Rowdy Feast. They have a big event every year, where they get together and dine and celebrate Saint Expedite. But also down in Louisiana, if you ever get the chance to go to New Orleans and you can get to the cathedral, there's a massive statue of Saint Expedite. And I've made many pilgrimages to that statue. I've had a chance to talk to some of the priests there. And for a while, they tried to hide that statue because there was a concern in the Catholic Church, again, about, is this really a saint? Do we want to encourage people to look to him as an intercessor? And when they took the statue away, there was a huge outcry. So they had to bring it back. But the bishop was very much of the mind that this statue was not going into a prominent place. It could be in the cathedral, but it couldn't be, front and center. So I believe the last time I saw it, it was in a little alcove by itself, but they had to fence it off because of the people coming in with Sara Lee pound cake. There were mounds of pound cake being left at the statue. Even with the cordons, people are going through and putting the pound cake in front of the statue. And every night the priests have somebody that has to go in and take it away. They're afraid to eat it, obviously, because you just don't know these days. But they also can't give it away because they've been seen doing that. And again, people really take this seriously. You cannot help yourself to Saint Expedite's pound cake. Yeah. So every night they quietly, after they close the cathedral, they take that away and dispose of it. But the next day, more pound cakes start showing up. So I highly recommend it if you're ever down there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Oh, and Nick Lachetti left a great comment for those who aren't here live, which is, I'm glad there's still Italian American Catholic causing problems for the church hierarchy today. Something I forgot. I mean, this is neither here nor there, but it was something important. I didn't get a chance, because we're wrapping up now. I didn't get a chance to talk about reunion. But a reunion is a real mixed culture. Back in the French colonial days, they moved people from all around the empire for administration and for labor and what have you to reunion. So there is a real mix, but there's a lot of people of Indian descent, as in from India, and there. Saint Expedite's been synchronized with Kali, the Hindu goddess, not even a god this time, which is quite interesting. And for those, I'm sure you've probably at least seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which is a very disrespectful summation of Kali, but at the same time, it's often shown as this grotesque figure with fangs and covered in blood, with many hands holding severed heads. And I find it fascinating. And it is a deaf goddess, right? A chthonic goddess that literally on the other side of the world, he's still being synchronized with a deaf deity, with a deaf entity. That's sorry, I have pronunciation problems. I'm not good at my TH, so that is of course the death as in dying, which again kind of makes me think of like this is an entity, be it literal, psychological, whatever, that has its own agenda, that is these things, right? That wants to be synchronized with death, right? That's something that just with death that occurs to people when they think of today, not tomorrow. So I found that really, really, really fascinating because they're not particularly similar figures. Saint Sarah the Black in France has been synchronized with Kali by the Roma people who originally come from India. But that makes a little bit more sense. She's female. She comes from over the ocean. Sometimes they call her Sarah the Kali. Okay, there's a little bit more of a connection there. But a Roman centurion wearing a red cloak who's a dude, okay, it's not as directly obvious to me. So just wanted to get that in before we oh yeah, and Lovato, thank you, Lovato T430 says definitely a connection of Kali or Hecate as a crossroad liminal spirit deity. That's right, and that'd be another reason as well. I did forget to mention that because he's this connector between the worlds, because he quickly moves between them, a liminal figure who is associated with crossroads as well. So thank you, computer person. Oh, hi, Sarah. It's not one of those AIs I've been reading about coming to life.
As I say, your mention talking about the identification with Baron Samedi jog my brain. I mean, there's lots of stuff that I know lots about, and then there's even more that I know little about. But I was thinking about, of course, the skeleton and the top hat and being the image or association with death, and that reminded me I had the opportunity to do the whirling dervish thing while we trekked through Turkey, and of course the dervishes wear these gigantor hats, and the hats are symbolic of their own tombstone.
That there's probably the same symbolism.
The height of the hat and the nature of the hat. Particularly, I mean, that's one of the things that you notice, when you go walking through Turkey, of course, is that things we take for granted, but people are sometimes struck as odd because when you walk through a Turkish cemetery, we're so used to seeing cemeteries with crosses, right? Of course, but you're not going to see that there, and instead, the tombstones are more akin to what you see, like the dervish's hat, being that kind of almost standing stone type of thing. And as you were getting into the Baron, for the first time in my life, for reasons unknown, those two things connected in my head.
That's really neat. Yeah, I bet you there's a direct link with that symbolism there. And something else, like I did mention, I actually live in one of the great voodoo cities, because there's so many Haitians here, right? Montreal is one of the Haitian capitals of the world. And I do have this strong interest in voodoo, and there is the Gnostic voodoo tradition. The Gnostic church the revival comes from France. So for the colonial connections, it does go to Haiti. There is forms of Gnosticism that combined with voodoo there, with voodoo. But it's not a tradition I'm deeply in. And I'm not somebody who's a big fan of cultural appropriation narratives, but that's a whole different topic, and we're going to stay away from politics. But at the same time, I feel uncomfortable, grabbing this entity, right, of a tradition that I'm not fully in. But I can have a touch of that with Saint Expedite, right? Because I feel, I'm not. He's a white guy from Italy. So I'm fine with that. Hey, there's some white guys from Italy right here on this chat that I know well. So that way I can kind of have my Sara Lee pound cake and eat it too, where I can explore some of this interest in Baron Samedi and the voodoo tradition without, I think, and again, I don't like the term cultural appropriation, but it'll do for now, without me getting any feelings that I'm misunderstanding voodoo or stealing something from it, or I've got enough traditions going on right now. So finally, we do need to wrap up. I am one of the longest reigning seminarians in the Apostolic Johannite Church, as His Eminence was saying at the beginning. So I'm not actually joking. I like to try to be clever and have my little quips, but this is absolutely not a joke. I do ask everybody watching this to pray to Saint Expedite for me that I get my seminary papers done, and I'm not being facetious. If you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. Saint Expedite will appreciate it. You can look up online if you want to go elaborate, but if not, just before you go to bed at night, just say, Saint Expedite, help Deacon John get his seminary papers done. And everybody, beloved friends, that would mean a lot to me. So thank you so much.
Does it lessen the effect if I eat the pound cake?
Yeah, no, Father John is saying, don't be careful there. It is, yeah. I actually, in the Voodoo tradition and in the Voodoo tradition, you do share in the offerings and in other traditions too. But with Saint Expedite, you're never supposed to do it. You can bring it and bury it in a cemetery. Sometimes feed it to birds in a cemetery. Sometimes bury it at crossroads. But you're not supposed to eat his pound cake. So.
Yeah, I was wondering because I mean, if I was the priest maintaining an Expedite shrine, the pound cake would keep. Would keep disappearing, but somehow mysteriously Father Sean just keeps getting fatter and fatter.
Yeah,
and someone's prayers were answered. Not my cardiologist, however.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have told him, like, if in the Lotto 649 lottery, if you give me $10 million, I will build you that shrine and give you all the pound cake you want, Saint Expedite. But no luck yet.
Thank you for the very, very excellent talk. And as Father John noted in the chat, if you ever wanted to team up to argue for Expedite on the calendar, you've got a partner there. And I think this is one of the things we've been talking about. Not only folk saints, but Expedite specifically over the years at conclaves has come up, from more religious folks, from more occulty folks, that type of thing. And so it's definitely something that has this kind of, frequency that has been running in the background. Two things that I was going to mention on the saints that are kind of analogous to that is like, I'm a big fan. You mentioned Saint Sarah, and as I noted to the home parish crowd, I love it when we encounter pilgrim saints, because pilgrim saints are kind of the universe in miniature where Christianity is concerned, because Christianity throughout history is always leaving somewhere and going somewhere. And so the idea is, what are you taking with you from where you come and bringing to your new spot, and what are you adapting when you get there? And so you have these things where traditions get blended. A favorite storyteller, the mythologist Martin Shaw, remarked that the Old Testament, so-called, of Irish Christianity, is the land, the mythology, stuff like the Tua De Dan and that type of thing, right? Whereas for straight up Christianity, right, it's quote unquote Old Testament, and sorry to use that term, is the Hebrew Bible. But in other places where Christianity is found, their quote unquote Old Testament is something else. So, there's a degree to which the Old Testament, so-called, to steal that phrase or that thing from Shaw, of course, is magic and the esoteric in the realm of the AJC. And so folk saints and Expedite specifically, many times over the years, has kind of been the backdrop on which some of our conversations have been built. So I always find that very, very interesting. So perhaps him or more like him will be kind of taken from the background into the foreground. But as folks know from our panel a few years ago, saints aren't something we just generally drop on the calendar, because I feel like we like to know that there actually is a measure of following or adherence or use type of thing in the church, and also that the best kind of argument for why the church endorses a particular thing is because its people endorse a particular thing. So the best place for that to come is from you guys, right? So I will keep an eye on my email, in other words.
Yeah, I'll be in touch though with you, Father Digilio, and we will look into it. But again, yeah, and I know we need to wrap up. I just find it charming that he's a saint that wants to be known, right? He's always just reaching out to people, and he wants friends. I like that. So maybe we can help him with that mission. So
Sounds good.
yeah.
So for folks, we will be meeting back here in 16, 17 minutes. We did, as mentioned, there was a snag for Bishop Scott's talk, so we're taking the Q&A from the evening and dropping it into that spot. So if you have questions about AJC, Gnosticism, Christianity, all that kind of stuff, if you've ever heard the previous Q&As we've done to get a kind of idea of those things, jot them down or drum them up, and in 15, 20 minutes time, bring them out and we'll ramble on them. So, or we'll just sit around, and if nobody's got questions, we'll sit around and shoot the shit, but we like questions. You just have to deal with the resulting ramble. So thank you, Jonathan. That was an excellent talk. And I love this stuff. So I eat it up like pound cake.